Welcome to the brand new series of Simpsons What If. Today we're going to be looking at what if Herbert Powell was Sideshow Bob to Bart Simpson, but for Homer. Let's go ahead and dump right in, essentially saying what would happen if Herbert Powell was trying to kill Homer Simpson like Sideshow Bob does. So, let's go ahead and start off with who is Herbert Powell. For those of you who don't know, Herbert Powell is Homer's half-brother. He was introduced in season 2. He was voiced by Danny DeVito. He does have 2 episodes under his belt. Well, 2 major ones. He does come back as a cameo in at least 1 or 2 other episodes. And I think 1 actually not that long ago. But anyway, so Homer finds out that he has a half-brother. He goes and finds him. He finds out that he's an eccentric millionaire. He owns an automotive company that's very successful. And his brother ends up loving Homer so much that he says, hey, I want you to design a car that is going to make or break my company. And your car is essentially designed for the average person, or for the Homer. And as you can probably guess, everything does not go according to plan. Homer ends up making this monstrosity of a vehicle that was absolutely crazy, and Herbert eventually goes bankrupt for it because of how expensive his car was and how generally not so enthusiastic everybody else for the market was for the car. I actually didn't mind the look of the car all that much, although it was ugly as sin. Anyway, and then in season 3, he ends up using Maggie to kind of get rich again by inventing a baby translator. Homer obviously tries to help him as best he can, but Herbert is just not having any part of it, which is why every time Herbert talks to Homer, he almost punches him in the face every single time, which is understandable because he completely destroyed him and destroyed his life. But let's go back to season 2, where Herbert was first introduced. And he gives Homer Simpson the task of designing a car for the average person. And obviously everything goes according to plan. Everything goes the way it happened in the show, where Homer does build or help build the car, and Herbert Powell Industries goes into toilet. But instead of, Herbert being a nobody character, then only coming back for one more real episode, let's say he was a reoccurring character, what would have happened and what would the overall show have been like from there? Well, let's take a look and see what Herbert Powell was like. He was an eccentric millionaire. He had a whole bunch of, probably high-end connections to the automotive world and whatnot. And he probably had a ton of resources at his disposal. In fact, there's a scene in season 2 where Homer gets pulled over by a cop and is mistaken for his brother, that the cop just straight up lets him go. But, and who's to say that Herbert doesn't have those type of connections outside of being an eccentric millionaire? Because then in season 3, like in this photo here, he's a bum. Or a hobo, or whatever you want to call it. Unhoused, or whatever the hell the political correct term bullshit is. But anyway, what would have happened if he didn't let that part of his life get so bad, and he actually takes it a step further and tries to get back at Homer Simpson, trying to kill him, because he's got great motivation. He's got a perfect motivation to try and go after Homer Simpson and try to kill him, because Homer came into his life after Herbert was extremely successful, and he was, like I said, he was a multimillionaire. He had his own car company. He had a mansion. He had money to burn, essentially. But like I said at the beginning of the video, I think the main reason this never happened was because he was voiced by Danny DeVito. And even in the 90s, Danny DeVito was a huge actor. In today's world, he's still a big actor. and I just don't think that his scheduling would have allowed him to be a main, like reoccurring character for The Simpsons. Now I know what people are going to say. Yes, I know Kelsey Grammer is also a relatively big known actor, and he does cameo in The Simpsons a lot and has a lot of solo episodes as well. And we'll get into that in another Simpsons What If at another time. But for now, we're focusing on Herbert. So I think the reason they didn't make Herbert Powell a reoccurring character is, like I said, because he's voiced by Danny DeVito. I think if he was voiced by maybe Dan Castellaneta doing a different voice, or some other actor that was a part of the show, I think they may have been able to bring back Herbert Powell as a reoccurring character or a reoccurring side character. But I think it's just because of the actor they got for him being Danny DeVito, they didn't want to try and shell out the cash to bring him back on a repeated basis. So they did say, hey, you're going to get 2 full-on episodes. You go from there. And then, like I said, by the end of season 3, he ends up getting his riches back, and he ends up forgiving Homer Simpson for screwing up his life. But I think the overall show would have had a much more interesting quality if they had had Herbert be a reoccurring character and have him feel kind of a little bit more like Sideshow Bob, but actually more sinister, or even, a little bit more dangerous, to the point where he is actually a major threat to Homer Simpson. But because Homer is such an idiot, he always manages to escape or always manages to survive because he is just that big of a dumbass. And it's one of those things that's like, I would have loved to have seen how the show would have been if Herbert wasn't just a 2-episode trick pony, where they could have brought him back for, maybe each season he showed up in 1 episode. Like in season 2, he only shows up in 1 episode. In season 3, he only shows up in 1 episode. But then every season after that, he's never mentioned except for like maybe 1 or 2 episodes, and one of those wasn't that long ago. So it always begs the question is like, if he was not voiced by such an A-list actor, could they have then had him be like a recurring cameo of the entire show, and what would he have been like if he had done that? So it's always one of those questions, but I toss it off to you guys. What do you guys think? Do you like this? And I'll catch you guys all next time. I hope you guys enjoy this news show. I'm trying to get started with YouTube. I've been actually planning this show for a long time now, and this video was actually planned for a while. It didn't turn out quite the way I had hoped, but I hope you guys enjoyed this show, Simpsons What If. If you guys want me to do more stuff like this, I've got a few ideas already jotted down, so let me know what you guys think in the comments down below.